The auction block was splintered with stained with sun and something darker, maybe wine, maybe blood. Dust spun like spirits in the dry July air, and the crowd buzzed low with heat-laced cruelty. In a town where names were worn thin as boot soles, folks gathered not for hope, but hunger. Hunger for cattle, wives, or stories to carry back to their saloons. He came on a dun horse, slow and steady like a man with nothing left to lose. They called him Ghost Eye behind his back. Some said from a bullet that missed his brain and found his soul instead. Others said he buried his wife out on the salt flats and hadn't spoken a full sentence since. Whatever the truth, his silence carried more weight than most men shouting. He dismounted without a word, boots crunching across sun-baked dirt, eyes fixed on the auction block. She stood last in line, separate from the rest, while the others had names barked by the auctioneer. Ruthie, Liz, Blue-Eyed May, this one was just called Lot 17. A sack covered her head, tied tight beneath her chin. Her shoulders were broad, her hands unchained but clenched, as though holding something fragile inside. She didn't shift or flinch or sway. She stood like a question mark the earth hadn't answered yet. The auctioneer's voice was wearing thin. Nobody want the witch? Huh, thought not. Black as midnight and dumb as a post. Says nothing, eats nothing. Someone tried to whip her. She bit through leather. He chuckled and spat near her bare feet. Start the bid at $5. Silence answered. No one moved. Some turned away. Others smirked. Ghost Eye didn't look at the crowd. He stepped forward, voice low and rough as dry bark. $1. A ripple of laughter rolled through the men, sharp and ugly. The auctioneer blinked. You making joke? He shook his head once. That's all she's worth to you, ain't it? The silence that followed wasn't friendly. Hell, the auctioneer muttered. Guess it's better than feeding her another day. He slammed the gavel down on a crate. Sold. To the dumb bastard with dead eyes. She didn't move as the preacher came forward with a ledger. Didn't speak when the auctioneer untied her from the post and shoved her forward. Only when the preacher cleared his throat and said, Bride must speak her name for the bond to hold. Did she lift her chin slightly beneath the sack? A second passed. Then two. Then she spoke. Ashani. The name was a stone dropped in a still pond. It rang like thunder in the belly. The preacher blinked, wrote it down. The rancher signed only his first name, Sam. They didn't kiss. Didn't even touch. He simply nodded once. Took her by the elbow, not rough, not soft, and guided her from the square like two ghosts slipping through a dream. The townsfolk watched them go, muttering half-prayers or curses or nothing at all. They rode out in silence, just the creak of saddles and the low groan of the wind. Ashani rode behind him on the dun, her sack still on. She didn't ask where they were headed. He didn't offer. It was near dusk when they reached his land, stretched under a sky the color of old bruises. The ranch looked half dead. Fence posts rotted, windmills squeaking like a dying songbird, and a barn that leaned like it drank too much. But it was land, and it was his. He dismounted, tied the horse, then turned to her. House is yours if you want it. I'll take the barn. He paused. Ain't no expectations. Just didn't want the men having you. She didn't speak. Just tilted her head the slightest bit, as if trying to see his face through the sack. He held her gaze, though he couldn't see her eyes. Later, by lantern light, he fed the horses, fixed a broken hinge, and sat with his back to the barn wall. The prairie wind carried a dry, brittle song, the kind that makes a man remember things better left buried. Inside the house, Ashani stood still in the dark. Her hands touched the edge of a table, a warped floorboard, the corner of a mirror covered in a rag. She didn't remove the sack. She just stood there, breathing slow, listening to a house that remembered someone else's footsteps. Back in town, the talk had already started. How the ghost-eyed rancher bought a curse woman with $1 and a vow. Some swore she'd slit his throat by moonrise. Others said maybe he saw something under that sack the rest were too blind to notice. Out on the porch, the wind rose sharp, tugging at Ashani's veil. She raised a hand to hold it in place, but didn't retreat. She watched the barn across the yard, its slats glowing faint orange from lantern light. A lone coyote called far off. Then silence again. In the barn, Sam didn't sleep. He just listened to boards creak, the land breathe, and the slow thunder gathering far out on the horizon. And somewhere between the silence and the storm, something began to shift, like two broken things learning how to lean against each other without splintering further. Tomorrow would come hard and hot. But tonight, the land held its breath. Morning came slow and mean, burning the frost-off fence wire and setting the brittle fields aglow in amber and ash. Sam rose before the sun cleared the ridgeline, his boots already caked in yesterday's dirt. The barn stank of sweat and old grief, and as he stepped out into the chill, he glanced once toward the house, where no smoke curled from the chimney. He didn't expect her to stay. She hadn't said another word since the name, but there she was, seated cross-legged on the porch steps like a statue carved from night, sack still on, hands resting quietly on her knees. Behind her, the door hung ajar. A sliver of shadow clung to the threshold. He gave a nod. She gave none back. By mid-morning, he was in the south field digging out a post root that refused to rot proper. Sweat bled through his shirt in patches, though the wind stayed sharp. From the corner of his eye, movement, a cloth flutter, a slow stoop. She was hanging a curtain inside the house. Not new, not pretty, just patched linen, the kind used to bandage soldiers or wrap dead children. But it moved in the window like it belonged. He didn't speak to her that day, nor she to him. But something settled inside the house, a presence that didn't echo. That night, he left a tin of beans and cornbread on the porch. In the morning, both were gone, and the plate had been washed clean. On the third night, a wind came in loud from the west, dragging dry leaves across the yard like bones rattling in a sack. He sat on the barn floor oiling a rust-bitten rifle, firelight painting orange arcs across the walls. The old rocking chair in the house let out a low moan, which shifting against silence. His chest clenched tight, though he told himself it was just wind, just settling. She was inside. She lit the fireplace, though no smoke rose. The flame inside danced low and steady, casting her shadow against the cracked plaster. She stood facing it, hands out like she didn't trust the warmth. He watched through the barn's open door, saw her lower her sack-covered head, and turned slowly toward the mantel. There, she lifted something from behind a tin can, a child's boot, mud stiffened and torn at the ankle. She didn't cry, just held it a long while, then placed it back, the gesture tender as prayer. He turned his face from the sight, jaw tight. The boot had belonged to Luke, his boy, lost to the border wars for springs back, after riding off with his mother, and a rifle he couldn't carry straight. When Sam found his wife's body in the well, and no trace of the boy but that boot, he buried half of himself with them. He hadn't touched the thing since. That night, he dreamed of hooves pounding on ash and a boy's voice calling through smoke. When morning came, Ash-on-Knee was sweeping the porch. The sack still shrouded her face, but her body moved with rhythm now, like she remembered what it meant to exist beyond survival. Her arms had strength, but not defiance. Her steps, though quiet, did not shrink from the world. He walked past the well, dropped the bucket, and drew water that smelled faintly of moss and iron. She came up behind him. He offered the dipper without speaking. She took it, drank once, then said, "Your wife wore lavender. There's still some caught in the window sash." He turned slowly. "You been in her room?" She nodded. A pause, long as dusk. "She's dead," he said. "I know." Their eyes held a moment too long, though hers were unseen. Then she returned the dipper and walked back toward the house, her footsteps not quite silent anymore. Days folded into each other like smoke over fire. Ash-on-Knee began tending the hearth, setting out food without asking what he liked. Sam started leaving the barn door open, letting her know he was near. Still, they shared few words. Just glances, small exchanges of motion, tools left on porch steps, cloth mended at night. Then one evening, as cicadas screamed in the fields when blue in the dying light, she hummed. Just a single thread of sound, high and low like water over stones. The tune didn't belong to any church or saloon. It was older, rougher, half-wild. Sam froze on the porch as it drifted out from the kitchen. He knew that song, had heard it once during a raid at Fort Red Clay, where blood ran from the stone floor like spilled paint and the air reeked of gunpowder and shame. A native boy had sung it, knees in the dirt, while soldiers dragged his mother by her hair. Sam's hands curled into fists. He entered without knocking. Ashani stood at the hearth, knife in hand, gutting a rabbit. The humming ceased. "Where'd you learn that?" She didn't turn. "My father sang it before the whites took his tongue." Sam stared at her. "You ain't from around here." She paused, then nodded. "Wasn't born to stay put." "What else they say about you?" "That I kill in silence. That I bring drought. That I wear the sack, so devils don't find my face again." "And is any of it true?" She finally turned to him. Only the silence part. He nodded once, then stepped outside without another word. That night, thunder coiled in the distance, pulsing behind the hills. Ashani came to the barn, barefoot, blanket in hand. She paused in the doorway. He set down the tin cup in his hand and looked at her. "You can stay." She shook her head. "I'll sleep near the horses." He didn't argue. As she laid down, firelight flickered over her figure. For the first time, she looked less like a secret and more like a wound starting to heal. Sam sat in the loft above, knees drawn to chest, rifle resting nearby. He watched the storm crawl closer, wind stirring dry hay like whispers. Ashani didn't move all night. But as the rain began to fall, slow and sure, Sam heard something from below, soft, almost nothing. A name, not hers, a child's, and the ache in it was the same one buried under his own ribs. In the dark, beneath a leaking roof, two broken names began to rhyme. The sound of hooves cracked the hush of the land before the dust rose. Sam was mending fence wire near the creek, a coil of rusted barbs at his feet, when the wind shifted and brought with a scent he didn't like: gun oil, stale sweat, and something underneath, like mold left too long in a locked room. He stood and saw the rider. Black hat, silver conchos on his saddle glinting like snake eyes. His horse was lean and restless, ribs like shadows under hide. The man rode straight, no hesitation, like he'd come a long way not just to find someone, but to collect. Ashani stood in the doorway, sack still tied, though the edge of it fluttered in the breeze. Her posture didn't change, but Sam felt her stiffen from across the yard. The rider reined in near the porch, boot dusting the ground. "Fine place," he said, voice slick, like honey gone rancid. "Bit quiet. I take it you're Sam Caldwell." Sam nodded once. The man smiled with only the corners of his mouth. "Name's Wilkes. Marshal by title, though I wander more than I police these days." He looked past Sam, toward Ashani. "I'm here on federal business. That woman you got? She's an escapee from a sanctioned labor caravan, property of the Reconstruction Bureau." Sam didn't blink. "She's my wife. Paper don't change blood." Wilkes dismounted slowly, boots crunching gravel. "You're harboring a fugitive, and a dangerous one." Ashani didn't move. Not a twitch. Sam's jaw set like stone. "She was sold legal," he said. "Auction held in town. Signed by preacher, stamped by clerk." Wilkes smiled wider now, the kind that tastes of rust. "Paper don't matter when there's reward on a face. She ain't got rights, just a price. Word is, she cut down 3 guards with a broken bottle back in Kansas. You marry a woman like that, you best sleep with one eye open." Sam's hand brushed the handle of his hatchet, lying in the grass. "You came alone?" Wilkes chuckled. "Always do. Makes the split cleaner." A beat of silence passed. Ashani stepped forward then. Only one pace. Enough to show she wasn't afraid. The wind caught the corner of her sack, pulling it back just enough for Wilkes to glimpse her jawline, marked with ritual scarring, one faint burn above the cheekbone. His smirk faltered. "I ain't here to make trouble," he said quickly. "Just doing my job. I'll be back in a few days with paperwork and men." He looked to Sam. "Think about what you're risking. She ain't worth dying over." He turned and mounted again, riding off without waiting for a reply. The silence he left behind was thicker than smoke. That night, Sam stood by the house with his rifle across his back. Ashani lit the lantern inside and set out 2 bowls on the table. They sat across from each other without speaking, the air between them heavy as wet wool. After a long while, she said, "He'll come back." "I know." "You'll fight him?" Sam looked down into his stew, then back at her. "Wouldn't be the first bastard I've bled for someone I barely understand." She held his gaze, then reached up, slow, deliberate, and untied the sack. Her face was no monster's. It was a story written in scar tissue and shadows. Her left eye was cloudy with a heel burn, her lips lined with faint cuts, but her gaze was unbroken, fierce, alive. She said, "I was born in a swamp camp outside Nacogdoches. My mother was Gullah, my father Comanche. They called me Ashani after storm. When soldiers came, they killed him first, branded me after, said I'd fetch a good price if I was quiet. So I was..." Sam didn't look away. "I did kill them, not out of hate, out of hunger and fear, and because I promised my youngest boy I'd find him again." Her hands trembled on the tabletop. He'd just turned 6. Sam's voice was rough when it came. "You got names?" 3 boys, Haru, Elias, and Boone, all taken west, sold separate. Her voice cracked. I remember the way Boone screamed. Sam reached across the table, not to touch, but to anchor her. "You remember the way he screamed. That means you still got something to fight for." She looked down, then met his eyes again. "What do you fight for, Sam?" He hesitated. "A piece of land that don't hate me. A name that don't rot in someone else's mouth. And maybe a morning that don't taste like regret." She studied him. "You ever kill a man?" "Plenty." "Why?" He leaned back, jaw clenched. "Because sometimes justice don't show up with a badge." The lantern flickered. Outside, the wind howled low and long like something wounded was crawling across the plains. Ashani stood. "He's not coming back with paper. He's coming back to kill us both." "I know." "Will you let him?" Sam rose too. "I buried a wife that lost her mind. I buried a son I never got a hold again. You think I'm about to let some dog in a star badge write the last line of my story?" She stepped closer. Their shadows touched on the floorboards. He said, "If we're going to fight, I need to know who I'm standing beside." "I told you my name," she said. "I told you what I've done." "That ain't what I asked." Ashani raised her chin. "Then look." And in her eyes, he saw not a wife, not a fugitive, but a storm-wearing skin. He said, "Then we'll meet him as 2. That night, she didn't sleep in the barn. She slept by the fire, her back to his, both of them wrapped in silence. No longer strangers, not quite lovers, but something stronger. The wind outside carried dust and promise. And far off, beyond the hills, Wilkes was sharpening knives. The morning came hollow and gray, sky hanging low as a noose, the kind of day when the land itself feels like it's holding its breath. Sam woke with sweat at his spine and thunder in his ribs. Ashani was already outside, her face bare to the wind, sharpening a blade against the porch rail with long, deliberate strokes. No sack, no veil, just her and the air and the sound of steel remembering its purpose. Neither of them spoke. Words felt small today. By midday, birds vanished from the sky. Even the wind paused to listen. It was just after the sun began to sink, that cursed hour where shadows stretch and truth shows its teeth, when the first rider crested the ridge. Then another, then the third. Wilkes rode at the center. He wore a dust-gray duster that flared behind him like wings. His smile was the same, crooked mean snake-born. The 2 men with him carried rifles across their backs and ropes at their saddles. No badges, no paperwork, just killing in their eyes. Sam stood in front of the porch, shotgun cradled across his arms. Ashani beside him, blade in her belt, rifle slung over her shoulder, breath calm as riverstone. Wilkes dismounted, let the reins fall, and walked forward slow. "I gave you a chance," he said, voice easy, like a man talking about weather. "Told you what she was. You decided to make it difficult." "You brought rope," Sam said. "Not law. Sometimes the 2 are the same. Not on my land." The others spread out, flanking, slow and sure. One moved toward the barn, the other toward the well. Wilkes stayed center. "You know what she's done?" he said, gesturing to Ashawnee. "She's killed more white men than smallpox. She's a ghost out of slave camps and war stories. You're going to die defending a shadow." "I ain't defending her," Sam said. "I'm standing beside her. Big difference." Wilkes drew first. But Sam had lived with grief too long to blink. The shotgun roared once, and the man near the barn dropped, chest blown wide. Ashawnee turned, rifle lifting in a smooth arc, fired. The second man collapsed against the well stones, body twitching like a broken marionette. Wilkes dug behind a watering trough, shouting curses. Silence fell for a breath. Then bullets. The trough shattered in a spray of water and wood. Sam dropped behind a porch pillar. Ashawnee rolled beneath the rail, coming up crouched, blade in hand. Gunfire cut splinters through the walls. Then it stopped. The silence was heavier than before. Ashawnee crept along the porch edge, barefoot, quiet as dusk. Sam waited, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the trough. Then Wilkes' voice, low and close. "You think you're better than me, rancher? She ain't yours. She'll get you soon as the sun sets. Same way she did the others." "She stayed," Sam said. And then he saw him. Wilkes, crouched low, pistol aimed for the house. Sam shifted. A shot cracked. Sam fell back, breath catching like a stone in his lungs. Ashawnee screamed, not loud but sharp like a cord snapping. She ran to him, blood already soaking through his shirt, warm and fast. He gasped shoulder. She tore cloth from her sleeve, pressed it firm. Then she rose. No rifle, no knife, just her. She walked into the yard, stepped slow, steady hands empty. Wilkes stood now, gun in both hands, smile twisted wide. "What? No tricks left." Ashawnee said, voice clear, "My name is Ashawnee, daughter of flame, widow of war, mother to the lost." He scoffed. "You ain't nothing but a branded dog." She stepped closer. "I wore the sack, so your kind wouldn't recognize a storm coming." Then she moved, faster than wind. Blade pulled from the small of her back like thunder drawn from bone. She lunged low, under the muzzle, slashed once. Wilkes screamed, dropped his gun, clutched his face, blood pouring from where his eye used to be. She didn't hesitate. The second cut was clean, quiet, merciful in its own way. He fell to his knees, then the dirt. Behind her, Sam groaned. Ashawnee ran to him, knees sinking into the blood-wet earth. She held his face in her hands. He tried to speak. She said, "You're not dying. Not now. Not after this." His voice was a scrape. "Didn't buy you to save me, but I'm glad you did." She smiled through tears. When the rain finally came, it wasn't hard or furious. It was gentle, cleansing. They buried Wilkes and the others under the ash tree. No markers, no prayers, just dirt over bones. In the days that followed, Ashawnee stripped the burned porch, rebuilt it with fresh wood. Sam moved slower, shoulder bound tight, but his eyes were sharper now, brighter, less hollow. She planted herbs near the windowsill, left her sack hanging on the barn wall, like a warning or a grave. By the third week, green shoots pushed through the scorched field. And one evening, as twilight painted the horizon gold, Sam sat on the steps while Ashawnee stood in the doorway behind him. From the edge of the field came a sound, high, laughing, childlike. Sam looked up. Ashawnee's face went still. It came again. Laughter. Light, strange, familiar. But when they looked, there was nothing, only wind, and hope, and the promise that not all lost things stay buried.